Why do we connect trees with learning? What exactly is the tree of knowledge and not being able to see the forest for the trees? I'm going to tell you a story about my relationship with the tree of knowledge, an epic tale of love, betrayal, and back to love. I'm Karen Caldwell, and this is my story. Let's get started with Act 1, the tree climber. I fell in love with learning at a very early age, but it's been a rough relationship to build with what I saw as the tree of knowledge. Although my learning never came easy, it didn't stop me. My mantra was, if you want the fruit, you have to climb the tree of knowledge. So what was in the tree? For me, authority. From the teacher, author, books, newspapers, and certain adults. I'm from a big family, and when I wasn't learning in school, I learned from the adults in my life. My mom and dad, both in different ways. Dad's tree of knowledge held coaching and storytelling. My mom, on the other hand, was my Google when I didn't want to use a dictionary or encyclopedia. Any question, she could answer. For over a quarter of a century, the tree of knowledge and I had a groovy kind of love. So strong was our relationship that I took it a step further. I became a teacher. When I graduated with my teaching diploma, I went to Korea to teach. But there was one problem. I would have no source of knowledge. This was the first major hiccup in my relationship with the tree of knowledge. This was back in 1995. No one I knew had heard of the internet, and certainly not the World Wide Web, which meant no Google, and even worse, no Mum. Remember, Mum was my Google. The only solution was to take learning with me in my carry-on luggage. And this book by E.D. Hirsch was like a mini encyclopedia. So off I went with my book version of The Tree of Knowledge. And while I was in Korea, I used Hirsch's book regularly. And lucky for me, the internet spread through universities. And so too did the World Wide Web. The Tree of Knowledge and I reunited, and it felt so good, which meant I could get back to climbing the tree when I hit the road for a new country, Turkey, where I lived for 3 years. And through the connected tree of knowledge I knew as the internet, I had access to conferences and courses from around the world. This was probably the honeymoon phase of my love affair with the tree of knowledge, and this phase continued on to my next move, this time to the Arabian Gulf. In the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, it was clear that I was still climbing the tree of knowledge. In all of my moves, I only took books, South Korea to Turkey, and Turkey now to the Gulf. No furniture, clothing, or souvenirs. But my climbing was getting a bit stale, and I needed to shake up my love affair with the tree of knowledge. So my new tree climbing adventure was to try to become a doctor of education. And that, my friends, was when things changed. Oh boy, did they change. Enter Act 2, the Neuron Tree. My specialization, mind, brain, and teaching, is a combination of sciences: cognitive science, neuroscience, and educational psychology. We'll get to the neuron tree in a moment, but first, you need to know that despite having an amazing husband who fed and watered me, I could barely keep up with the coursework and research. And when I reached the first major milestone of the doctorate after 2 years, the 2-hour completely oral comprehensive exam, my relationship with learning hit the wall. It betrayed me. After 50 years together, the tree of knowledge and I were in crisis. Just 2 weeks before the exam, I met with my advisor to practice under exam conditions, and I just had nothing. I sputtered, babbled, rambled incoherently, and she had to stop me. "How have you been studying?" she asked, and the betrayal was revealed. With more than a smidgen of pride, I described my long hours of rereading the seminal papers of the program and highlighting important information. Cue the crickets. My advisor gently explained to me that, well, I knew better. I knew that this approach, while comfortable and traditional, was not nearly as valuable as strategies like actively recalling the information to mind and several other scientifically supported approaches. As an example, we had read and discussed the strategies in Dunlosky and colleagues' 2013 paper, where not only did I learn what did work, I also learned what explicitly are strategies to avoid. Yeah, you guessed it, rereading and highlighting. So who was I to call myself a future doctor of education, and even worse, a specialist in mind, brain, and teaching, the cognitive sciences, when I was not even following the prescriptions for effective learning? Not only was this a matter of doctor heal thyself, but it truly was one of those existential punches to the gut. This was my identity: teacher, coach, instructor. with aspirations to be a doctor of education, all based on the now very shaky foundations of my relationship to learning. I honestly felt betrayed and also like I was a fraud, with the 50-year relationship on shaky grounds. The tree of learning was wilting, even lifeless, and seemed to be disappointed in me too. My mentor contacted me after a few days of wallowing and explained that I needed to shift my mindset. And we know that mindsets do not change overnight, so my brilliant mentor had me start slow, with habits or strategies. She told me about this new book by the researchers we'd been reading. And like a good student and mentee, I finally took the wheel in my relationship with learning and with science into my hands. And here we return to the tree metaphor and a connection to neurons. In his 2017 book, The Brain Rules for Aging Well, molecular biologist John Medina shares an amazing tree above tree metaphor about the brain that you see on the screen. And that's one neuron hovering above another. In this metaphor, the tree or neuron at the top sends electrical signals down to the telodendria, where neurotransmitters or chemical signals travel across the gap between the trees or neurons and bind to the receptors in the next tree or neuron. This is the foundation of neuroplasticity. What I was failing to recognize in my very comfortable, static, and one-way relationship with the tree of knowledge was that it wasn't so one-way, and that we actually had some serious chemistry and electricity between us. The great threat to my love affair with learning was me and my passive, receptive, transactional approach to learning. So returning to cognitive science and taking charge of my learning is what I needed, and it paid off. I followed the prescriptions from the cognitive sciences and managed to graduate, and even win an award in the process. And yes, that's my mentor on the bottom, and another up on the left, and my mom and my hubby on the right. But still, there was one more battle that remained, that brain-changing time of life called menopause. This brings us to our third and final act, the Wood Wide Web. Allow me to set the scene. Now in my early 50s, menopause and the related hormonal changes are really kicking my butt. As a freshly minted doctor of education in mind, brain, and teaching, I was ready to launch into a new direction in my career. Not so fast. With this change, I faltered and stumbled once again, but this time I knew enough to rekindle my upcycled and evidence-based relationship with learning and see what science could do for me. Enter the tree of knowledge one more time, and this time the metaphor of the Wood Wide Web, which comes to us thanks to a Canadian researcher, Suzanne Simard. Simard found that there's an underground network or Wood Wide Web that trees use to actually work together, including sharing resources like nutrients and signals. What Simard found was so groundbreaking is that these connections happen across species, even though their roots don't fuse together. So you're probably wondering how this relates to menopause and my relationship with learning. Well, I'm glad you asked. The Wood Wide Web that trees use reminds me of the enormous web of connections I have built, not only within my brain through neuroplasticity, but also through my learning and teaching around the world. The power of this ecology for me is the supportive and empowering webs we weave across time and geography. It's the incredible power of neuroplasticity in our own bodies, as well as the connections, the Wood Wide Web that is ours to make what we want. And so the tree of knowledge has evolved into a new empowering metaphor for me and my menopausal self. The Wood Wide Web, and to take charge of my relationship with learning, to form and nourish my own webs of empowering and supporting connections, and then use those webs to keep making connections. For me, that means climbing the tree still to get the fruit. But remember, learning is never an easy path, and the roots that form, some electrochemical, others through relationships, help us to be the tree of knowledge. So, dear friend, with your new understanding of the Wood Wide Web of knowledge, what's next? And more importantly, once you have the fruit, that great privilege of knowledge and connections, how about following the example that the late, great U.S. Senator John Lewis did and use it to get into trouble, good trouble? This is my new mantra. and I hope I've made you think about your own relationship with learning and the wood wide web that you already have. Happy learning!